What if a dog could raise cattle? When a devastating storm hits Elizabeth's Montana ranch, her German Shepherd Luna does the impossible, adopting 3 orphaned calves as her own. Watch this extraordinary bond transform lives and save a family legacy against impossible odds. Drop where you're watching from and subscribe now. The Montana sky darkened ominously as Elizabeth Miller, a weathered 60-year-old with silver hair always tucked under a worn Stetson, surveyed what remained of her cattle ranch. 6 months after burying Robert, her husband of 38 years, she still found herself talking to him whenever difficult decisions loomed. And today, with a violent spring storm threatening what little livestock she had left after the devastating flash flood 3 weeks prior, she needed his wisdom more than ever. "What would you do, old man?" she whispered, her voice carried away by the strengthening wind. The Big Sky Ranch, once boasting over 200 head of cattle, now barely maintained 30. The insurance money hadn't covered half their losses. Lightning split the sky as Elizabeth made her way to the barn, calling for Luna, her faithful German Shepherd. Robert had trained Luna from a pup, and the dog had proven herself invaluable for herding cattle with an intelligence that bordered on supernatural. These days, the shepherd seemed to sense Elizabeth's grief, rarely leaving her side. "Luna, where are you, girl?" Elizabeth called, her voice competing with the thunderclaps that now rattled the window panes of the weathered barn. Inside, she found Jake Rainwater, the only ranch hand she could still afford to keep on payroll. The middle-aged Blackfeet man had worked the land alongside Robert for 20 years and knew every creek and hillock of the property. "Storm's coming in fast, Liz," Jake said, concern etching his features. "We've got 3 pregnant heifers unaccounted for. Must have wandered off to the north pasture." Elizabeth's stomach tightened. "We can't lose any more, Jake. Not one more." "I know," he nodded grimly. "But that lightning's getting worse. We can't safely." A frantic barking interrupted him as Luna burst into the barn, soaking wet and agitated. The dog circled Elizabeth, pulling at her jeans with gentle teeth, then running toward the door. "She wants us to follow," Elizabeth said, grabbing her raincoat. Jake frowned. "It's dangerous out there, Liz." "Then stay here." "But I trust Luna more than I trust that weather report." The rain fell in punishing sheets as Elizabeth followed Luna into the tempest. The dog moved with purpose, leading her mistress through muddy terrain toward the northern boundary where the property met dense woodland. After 15 minutes of grueling progress against the wind, they reached a small ravine protected by a rocky overhang. There, in the dim light of Elizabeth's flashlight, lay the 3 missing heifers, and beside them, 3 newborn calves, still slick with birth. One heifer was clearly dead, likely from complications. The other 2 were breathing but weak, unable to tend to their offspring. "Oh God," Elizabeth breathed, immediately assessing the situation. Without colostrum from their mothers within hours, these calves wouldn't survive the night. Before she could formulate a plan, Luna did something extraordinary. The shepherd approached the mewling calves, sniffed them thoroughly, then lay down beside them, allowing all 3 to nuzzle against her warm body. Elizabeth watched in astonishment as Luna began to lick them clean, just as she would puppies. "What are you doing, girl?" Elizabeth whispered. Luna looked up at her mistress with eyes that seemed to say, "What needs to be done?" then returned to her maternal ministrations. Transfixed by the scene, Elizabeth barely noticed Jake arriving with emergency supplies. "Never seen anything like that in 40 years of ranching," he muttered, watching Luna curl protectively around the calves. "We need to get them back," Elizabeth said. "These 2 heifers might make it if we act fast." As they prepared to transport the animals, Elizabeth couldn't tear her eyes from Luna's protective posture. Something stirred in her chest, something she hadn't felt since Robert's passing. A fragile, dangerous thing called hope. Little did she know that this moment, born in the fury of a Montana storm, would change everything. The storm raged through the night, but by dawn, the skies had cleared to reveal a transformed landscape and an even more transformed barn. Elizabeth had worked tirelessly alongside Jake to stabilize the surviving heifers, but her attention kept returning to the extraordinary scene unfolding in the corner stall. Luna, her body curled protectively around the 3 orphaned calves, was allowing them to nurse. "That's biologically impossible," Elizabeth muttered, rubbing her exhausted eyes. Jake shook his head in wonder. Maybe so, but look at them. Those calves think she's their mama. Despite having no milk to give, Luna had positioned herself to let the calves suckle, providing the comfort they desperately sought. Elizabeth had supplemented with bottle feeding throughout the night, but it was Luna's warmth and attention that seemed to keep the newborns fighting. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Sarah Chun remarked later that morning after driving 40 miles from her veterinary practice in Bozeman. The young vet examined each calf thoroughly, her expression a mixture of scientific curiosity and disbelief. "Their vitals are surprisingly strong considering the circumstances." "It's Luna," Elizabeth said firmly. "She hasn't left their side." Dr. Chin nodded thoughtfully. "Interspecies adoption isn't unheard of, but a dog nursing cattle, that's new territory. Will they survive?" Elizabeth asked, the question catching in her throat. She couldn't bear more loss. Not now. With proper nutrition, maybe. But they've missed critical colostrum hours. Dr. Chun prepared formula in bottles. "We'll need to supplement aggressively and watch for infection." As they discussed treatment options, Elizabeth's phone rang. It was Diane from the local diner in town. News traveled fast in rural communities. "Liz, heard about your miracle dog from Jake's wife. Mind if I stop by later? My nephew works for the Bozeman Chronicle and thinks it might make a nice human interest piece." By afternoon, a young journalist with an eager smile and a state-of-the-art camera was crouched in Elizabeth's barn, capturing images of Luna tenderly cleaning one of the calves with her tongue. "Does she have her own puppies?" he asked, adjusting his lens. Elizabeth shook her head. "Never bred her. Robert, my late husband, always said she was too valuable as a working dog." The journalist paused, sensing a story. "And how long has it been since he passed?" Elizabeth stiffened. 6 months. The flood took half my herd 3 weeks ago. These calves, we can't lose them too. So it's been a difficult year," he prompted gently. "You could say that." Elizabeth's weathered face hardened. "Look, are you here for Luna or for a sob story?" The young man had the grace to look embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller. I just want to tell the full story." "Then tell it right." She gestured toward Luna, who had shifted positions to allow the smallest calf better access to her belly. "That dog is doing something scientists can't explain. Focus on the miracle, not the misery." The article appeared 2 days later. "Miracle Mom. Montana ranch dog adopts orphan calves." By nightfall, Elizabeth's ancient answering machine was full, and her rarely used email inbox overflowed with messages from local news stations and even national media outlets. "This is getting out of hand," she told Jake as they updated the makeshift nursery they'd constructed for Luna and her unlikely brood. "Could be an opportunity," Jake suggested cautiously. "Ranch needs income, Liz." Elizabeth bristled. "What? Turn us into some kind of circus sideshow?" "Not saying that. But folks are curious. Some might pay just to see something this special." The idea seemed absurd until Elizabeth reviewed her accounts that night. The truth glared back from spreadsheets that Robert had always managed. Without significant income soon, she'd lose the ranch within months. The next morning, she found Luna had somehow moved all 3 calves from the barn to the porch of the main house. The dog lay in the early sunshine, 3 black and white bodies snuggled against her golden fur. One calf raised its head at Elizabeth's approach and made a sound halfway between a moo and a bark. Elizabeth felt something crack inside her, the rigid shell of grief she'd wrapped around herself since Robert's death. She sank onto the porch step, tears flowing freely for the first time in months. "You're right, old girl," she whispered to Luna, who watched her with knowing brown eyes. "Sometimes family finds you in the strangest ways." She pulled out her phone and dialed Jake. "Tell Diane we're opening the ranch to visitors this weekend. $10 a car." After a pause, she added, "And call Dr. Chun. I want to make sure we're doing this right for the babies." Luna thumped her tail against the weathered porch boards, as if approving the plan. By Saturday morning, a dozen vehicles were already lined up at the cattle gate that marked the entrance to Big Sky Ranch. Elizabeth had hastily painted a wooden sign, "Luna and her calves, $10, and positioned Jake's teenage son, Tommy, to collect the cash. The local interest that had begun as a trickle now threatened to become a flood. "I didn't think this many people would actually show up," Elizabeth confessed to Jake as they watched a minivan full of children disembark, the kids' excited chatter carrying across the yard. Jake chuckled. You underestimate how far people will drive to see something they've never seen before. Elizabeth had relocated Luna and the calves to a clean, spacious pen near the main house, complete with a shelter for privacy and fresh straw bedding. Dr. Chun had visited again yesterday, expressing amazement at how the calves were thriving. They're imprinting on her completely, she had explained, watching the calves follow Luna's every movement. And the strangest part is, they're beginning to mimic her behaviors, the way they lie down, even some vocalizations. Now, as visitors gathered around the pen, Luna seemed to understand her role as the main attraction. The German Shepherd sat regally, amber eyes alert but calm, while her 3 adopted puppies clustered around her. "Can they touch them?" a woman asked, holding up her daughter who couldn't have been more than 4. Elizabeth shook her head. "Observation only. Luna's protective." As if to illustrate this point, when one spectator leaned too far over the fence, Luna gave a single, low growl that sent the man scrambling backward. "Smart lady," Elizabeth murmured to the dog. "You know who's family and who's just passing through." By late afternoon, Tommy had collected over $500, more cash than the ranch had seen in months. Elizabeth felt a conflicting mix of emotions: relief at the income, discomfort at commercializing what felt sacred, and gnawing worry about exploiting Luna. As the last visitors departed, an expensive black SUV pulled up. A tall woman in designer boots that had clearly never seen real ranch work stepped out, her sharp eyes taking in the property with an appraising look that immediately set Elizabeth's teeth on edge. "Mrs. Miller?" "Meredith Kingsley, Gateway Media. We spoke via email." When Elizabeth didn't respond, she continued, "I produce the morning show for KBZK. We'd like to feature your story, live broadcast, this Monday." Elizabeth crossed her arms. "I never responded to your email." Meredith smiled smoothly. "Which is why I came in person. This is a remarkable story, Mrs. Miller. Dog adopts orphan calves? It's the feel-good piece our viewers would love. And what's in it for us?" Elizabeth challenged. "Exposure. Which, frankly, you could use." Meredith gestured toward the weathered buildings. "This place has seen better days." Before Elizabeth could respond with the sharp retort forming on her tongue, Jake intervened. "Miss Kingsley, right? Why don't you come see Luna while Mrs. Miller considers your offer?" As Jake led the producer toward the pen, Dr. Chin's truck pulled up. The young vet had been stopping by daily, her professional interest clearly evolving into personal investment. "How are our patients today?" she asked, medical bag in hand. "The visitors tired them out," Elizabeth replied. "But otherwise good. The smallest one, I'm calling him Rusty, he actually yipped yesterday. Like a puppy." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "Vocalization adoption? I need to document this." "Elizabeth, what's happening here could be scientifically significant." They walked together to the pen, where Meredith was crouched at the fence, filming Luna with her phone. The shepherd had positioned herself between the calves and the stranger, her posture alert but not aggressive. "Is that normal behavior for her?" Meredith asked, not looking up from her phone. "She's a herding dog," Jake explained. "Protection is in her blood." Dr. Chin joined them, introducing herself and immediately launching into questions about the media coverage. "Are you planning to consult with animal behaviorists? This case could have significant research implications." Meredith's expression sharpened with interest. "Research? I was thinking human interest, but if there's a science angle." Elizabeth watched this exchange with growing unease. What had started as a private miracle, a lifeline for her grieving heart, was rapidly becoming something beyond her control. Yet the reality remained. Without income, there would be no ranch for Luna and her unusual family. "Monday," she finally said, interrupting the conversation. 1 hour, live segment. But Luna and the calves stay in their comfort zone. You bring the cameras to them, not the other way around. Meredith's smile was triumphant. "Perfect. Our viewers will eat this up." After the producer left, Elizabeth sank onto the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. Luna, sensing her distress, somehow managed to shepherd all 3 calves out of their pen and up to Elizabeth's side. The dog rested her head on her mistress's knee while the calves clustered awkwardly around them. "What are we getting ourselves into, girl?" Elizabeth whispered, scratching behind Luna's ears. The dog's only answer was a soft whine and unwavering loyalty in her amber eyes. The Monday morning broadcast transformed Big Sky Ranch overnight. What began as local curiosity exploded into national fascination when the segment was picked up by network affiliates across the country. By Tuesday afternoon, Elizabeth's ancient landline had stopped working entirely, overwhelmed by the volume of calls. "We need to get you set up with a proper website and online booking system," Dr. Chin suggested, helping Elizabeth sort through the pile of business cards and written messages that had accumulated. "And probably hire some temporary help." Elizabeth ran a weathered hand through her silver hair. "This was supposed to be a small thing, Sarah. Just enough to keep the lights on." "It's not small anymore," Sarah replied gently. "Luna's story has touched something in people." Outside, the makeshift parking area Jake had created in the east pasture was filled to capacity. Elizabeth had been forced to implement timed viewing sessions, with visitors rotating through every 20 minutes. The new admission price, $20 per adult, $10 for children, hadn't deterred anyone. Luna seemed unaffected by her newfound celebrity, remaining focused entirely on her 3 charges. The calves, now 3 weeks old, had grown surprisingly strong despite their difficult start. More remarkably, they had begun displaying behaviors that Dr. Chun described as unprecedented cross-species adaptation. "They follow her commands," Elizabeth explained to a fascinated group of visitors as Luna demonstrated. With a short bark, she called the calves to her side, and all 3 trotted over obediently. "She's teaching them like they're puppies, and they're learning." Among that day's visitors was a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair and intense eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He observed the demonstration with unusual focus, taking notes rather than photographs. As the viewing session ended, he approached Elizabeth directly. "Mrs. Miller?" "Dr. Jonathan Winters, University of Colorado. I specialize in comparative cognition and animal behavior." Elizabeth tensed. Scientists had begun calling and emailing, some with offers that felt more like threats to turn her ranch into a laboratory. Sensing her wariness, Dr. Winters smiled reassuringly. "I'm not here to disrupt what you've created. Quite the opposite. What's happening with Luna and these calves represents a unique opportunity to study interspecies bonding and adaptive learning in a natural environment. They're not research subjects," Elizabeth said flatly. "They're family, which is precisely why this situation is so valuable," he countered. "These calves are developing in an environment of genuine care, something impossible to replicate in a laboratory setting." He handed her a business card. "I'd like to document their development non-invasively. Full transparency, shared data, and funding for your ranch as a research site." Before Elizabeth could respond, Jake approached with urgency in his step. "Liz, you better come quick. There's someone here you need to meet." Near the main house stood a sleek woman in an expensive pantsuit, surrounded by an entourage of equally polished assistants. Even without the AgriCorp corporate logo prominently displayed on their portfolio folders, Elizabeth would have recognized the predatory look of developers. "Samantha Harding, AgriCorp Acquisitions," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You've created quite a sensation, Mrs. Miller." Elizabeth purposely didn't remove her work glove before shaking hands. "Just a dog doing what comes naturally, Miss Harding. Extraordinary dogs create extraordinary opportunities." Samantha gestured toward the barn. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately?" Inside, the corporate woman wasted no time. "AgriCorp is prepared to offer you $300,000 for the 3 calves. Full ownership, immediate transfer." The figure, enough to save the ranch twice over, hung in the air between them. Elizabeth's voice emerged as a hoarse whisper. "You want to separate them from Luna? We have state-of-the-art facilities for specialized livestock," Samantha continued smoothly. "Your dog has created something unique. Cattle that respond to canine training methods could revolutionize the industry." Elizabeth's mind raced. The money would solve everything: the mortgage, equipment repairs, hired help. Yet the thought of separating Luna from the calves she had saved and nurtured felt unconscionable. "Ms. Harding," she finally said, her voice steadying. "Those calves aren't livestock anymore. They're Luna's babies." Samantha's smile tightened. "Sentimentality is a luxury, Mrs. Miller. One I suspect you can't afford right now." "You'd be surprised what I can afford," Elizabeth replied, opening the barn door. "I believe we're done here." As the corporate team departed, Dr. Winters approached again. "I couldn't help overhearing," he said quietly. AgriCorps is notorious for commodifying agricultural innovations. Whatever they offered, the research value here is higher, especially if we prioritize animal welfare in the study design. Elizabeth looked toward Luna's enclosure, where the shepherd was playfully herding her calves in circles, teaching them to follow her lead with perfect, instinctive patience. "I need time to think," she said, suddenly exhausted by decisions with consequences she couldn't fully grasp. That night, as Elizabeth sat on her porch watching Luna and the calves settle down together under the vast Montana sky, she whispered into the darkness, "What would you do, Robert?" For the first time in months, the silence that answered didn't feel so empty. The first sign of trouble arrived with the mail 3 days later. A formal letter from the county assessor's office notifying Elizabeth of a substantial property tax increase due to commercial activity on agriculturally zoned land. The second came in the form of a black pickup truck with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks logos, carrying 2 solemn-faced officers who cited concerns about unregulated wildlife exhibition. "This is a working cattle ranch," Elizabeth argued, standing firmly on her porch steps. "Those calves aren't wildlife, and Luna is my herding dog." "Ma'am, we understand the situation is unusual," the senior officer replied, not unkindly. "But when you started charging admission, you crossed into exhibition territory. That requires proper permits, inspections, and liability insurance." After they left, Elizabeth slumped into Robert's old rocking chair, the weight of bureaucracy heavy on her shoulders. Luna approached, resting her chin on Elizabeth's knee with soulful eyes that seemed to understand everything. "What are we going to do, girl?" she whispered, stroking the dog's soft head. The ringing of her cell phone interrupted the moment. The screen displayed a number she hadn't seen in over 2 years. Her daughter, Catherine. Elizabeth's heart clenched as she answered. "Katie, Mom." The voice was so familiar yet distant, professional and cool. "I saw you on the news." An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and old wounds. "How are you?" Elizabeth finally managed. "Busy. Law firm's expanding." Catherine paused. "Why didn't you call me about the flood? Or any of this?" Elizabeth stared across the pasture, where the 3 calves were awkwardly prancing around Luna in what resembled a game of tag. "You made it clear you wanted nothing to do with the ranch." "That doesn't mean I don't care about you," Catherine snapped, then sighed. "Look, I'm flying in tomorrow. We need to talk about what's happening there." Before Elizabeth could respond, Katie added, "And I'm bringing someone from our firm's agricultural division. This Luna situation, you need proper legal guidance before corporations start circling." The next day, Elizabeth waited anxiously at Bozeman Yellowstone International Airport. When Catherine emerged from the terminal, Elizabeth barely recognized her daughter. Gone was the freckle-faced girl who'd once raced barefoot through mountain meadows. In her place stood a polished professional in a tailored blazer, her auburn hair, so like Robert's, now straightened and styled into an elegant bob. "Mom." Catherine nodded formally, then gestured to her companion, a sharp-eyed man with a leather portfolio. "This is Alan Doyle, our agricultural law specialist." The drive back to the ranch was strained, filled with Catherine's rapid-fire questions about visitors, income, and potential liabilities. Elizabeth felt increasingly defensive, especially when her daughter's tone turned accusatory regarding the ranch's financial situation. "If you'd sold after Dad died like I suggested, your father built this place from nothing," Elizabeth interrupted sharply. "It wasn't just a piece of real estate to liquidate. And now it's a petting zoo," Catherine retorted. Alan cleared his throat. "Ladies, perhaps we should focus on immediate concerns. Mrs. Miller, have you received any formal offers for the calves?" Elizabeth tensed. "How did you know about that?" "AgriCorps' interest isn't exactly secret," Catherine interjected. "Their CEO plays golf with one of our senior partners." As they crested the final hill revealing the ranch below, Elizabeth was startled to see dozens of vehicles in the parking area. Jake had clearly been overwhelmed by today's turnout. "My God," Catherine murmured. "It's a circus." Elizabeth felt a fresh wave of anxiety. It wasn't supposed to be like this. After parking, Catherine surveyed the property with critical eyes, taking in the weathered buildings, the visitors clutching phones to capture photos, and the hastily erected concession stand where Tommy was selling bottled water and Luna t-shirts that a local printing shop had produced on consignment. Dr. Winters set up the online booking system. Elizabeth explained as they walked toward Luna's enclosure. We've been limiting groups to manage the impact. Catherine's expression remained skeptical until they reached the pen. Luna was demonstrating an impromptu herding lesson, using gentle nudges and distinctive barks to guide her puppies into formation. The crowd watched in amazed silence as the three calves, now considerably larger but still utterly devoted to their canine mother, responded with dog-like obedience. They come when she calls, Elizabeth said quietly. They've learned to respond to herding whistles. Dr. Winters says it's unprecedented. They're developing a hybrid communication system. For the first time, Catherine's professional facade cracked. That's actually incredible. It's more than incredible, Elizabeth replied. It's saving us. Later that evening, after the visitors had gone, Elizabeth prepared dinner in the ranch house kitchen while Catherine and Alan reviewed documents at the dining table. Luna and her calves settled on the porch, visible through the window in the gathering twilight. The AgriCorps offer is substantially below market value for what they're really after, Alan was saying. They've been acquiring water rights throughout the county. I suspect this interest in Luna's calves might be a convenient pretext. Catherine nodded, then glanced at her mother. Why didn't you tell me things had gotten so bad financially? Elizabeth continued chopping vegetables, her back rigid. Would it have mattered? You made it clear ranching was beneath you. That's not fair. Catherine's voice cracked slightly. I needed to find my own path, away from everything your father valued. Elizabeth countered, setting down her knife with more force than necessary. Is that what you think? That I abandoned his legacy? Catherine stood abruptly. He's the one who told me to go. Katie girl, he said, this land isn't in your blood the way it's in mine. Find your own mountains to climb. Elizabeth stared at her daughter, stunned. He said that to you? The night before I left for law school. Catherine's eyes glistened. He knew I wasn't meant for this life. He wanted me to know it was okay. Outside, Luna began to bark urgently. The sound broke the tense moment, drawing all three humans to the window. In the fading light, they could see a coyote at the edge of the property, unusually bold in approaching so close to human activity. More shocking was Luna's response. She had positioned all three calves behind her, and they were huddled together exactly as puppies would be, awaiting their mother's signal. She's teaching them survival skills, Elizabeth whispered. Not as cattle, but as her pack. Catherine watched the scene unfold with dawning wonder in her eyes. Maybe there's something here worth fighting for after all. The summer drought arrived with merciless intensity, transforming Montana's lush landscape into a brittle, golden tableau. By August, the creek that had reliably watered Big Sky Ranch for generations had slowed to a trickle, and the expense of hauling water was draining Elizabeth's precious visitor revenue. Tourism had declined with the scorching temperatures, making each day a delicate balance of financial calculations and hard choices. In the kitchen, Elizabeth stared grimly at the numbers on her laptop while Catherine paced, her corporate demeanor fraying at the edges after 3 weeks back on the ranch. We need to consider AgriCorps' latest offer, Catherine argued, gesturing toward the thick portfolio on the table. $500,000 for the calves, plus water access rights. It would solve everything. They raised their offer because Luna's calves are too valuable to lose, Elizabeth countered. Which is exactly why we shouldn't sell. Mom, be reasonable. The drought alone will bankrupt us by October. Elizabeth closed her laptop with finality. They're not livestock to be sold off when times get tough. They're family. Catherine threw up her hands. You can't feed a family with sentiment. Dad would have made the practical choice. Don't you dare tell me what Robert would have done. Elizabeth snapped, her voice dangerously quiet. The tension between them crackled like the parched grass outside until Jake's urgent knock interrupted. Liz, Katie, Luna's gone, and the calves with her. The search party assembled quickly. Jake, Tommy, Elizabeth, Catherine, and Dr. Winters, who had been documenting the calves' development. They split into teams to cover the expansive property, all painfully aware that Luna had never before left her designated area. Could someone have taken them? Catherine asked as she and her mother hiked along the eastern ridge. Elizabeth shook her head. Luna would never allow it. She must have led them away for a reason. After 2 hours of searching under the punishing sun, Elizabeth's cell phone rang. It was Tommy. Mrs. Miller. Found tracks heading toward the old mining road. past the dry creek bed. That section of the ranch hadn't been used in decades. Rocky terrain unsuitable for grazing, with a labyrinth of shallow caves from an abandoned mining operation. Robert had always considered it worthless, focusing his efforts on the fertile valley land instead. Elizabeth and Catherine reached the area just as Jake emerged from a narrow ravine, waving his arms. "Here, they're down here." The scene they discovered defied explanation. In a depression between two rocky outcroppings, Luna stood guard over her 3 calves, who were drinking thirstily from a small but steady stream of water bubbling up from the ground. The shepherd's intelligent eyes watched her human family approach, her expression almost smug. "It's an artesian spring," Dr. Winters said wonderingly, kneeling to examine the water source. "Must have been covered by sediment for years until something, maybe the drought conditions, shifted the ground enough to release it." "Luna found water," Catherine whispered, awestruck. She knew exactly where to go. Elizabeth approached her faithful dog, dropping to her knees to embrace Luna's sturdy frame. "You brilliant, beautiful girl," she murmured against the shepherd's fur. Jake was already assessing the discovery with the practiced eye of a lifelong rancher. "This changes everything, Liz. Drought-proof water source on your own property? Worth more than gold in these parts." "We need to get Alan out here immediately," Catherine said, professional instincts kicking in. "And a hydrologist. If this spring connects to a significant aquifer, that's why AgriCorps wants this land," Elizabeth realized. Not just Luna's calves, they knew there was water here. Robert always said, "Land tells secrets to those who listen." She gazed admiringly at Luna. "She listened better than any of us." Back at the ranch house that evening, the atmosphere had transformed. Alan Doyle arrived with a hydrogeologist colleague who confirmed their suspicions after a preliminary survey. The spring likely connected to one of the region's largest untapped aquifers, potentially making Big Sky Ranch enormously valuable. "We need to move carefully," Alan advised. "File for water rights immediately and review all previous offers with this new information in mind." Catherine, who had spent the afternoon researching water law, nodded in agreement. AgriCorps has been systematically purchasing properties throughout the watershed. They're creating a monopoly and using Luna's calves as a smokescreen to get our land at a discount, Elizabeth added, the pieces finally fitting together. Later that night, after the experts had departed with promises to expedite the legal protections, Elizabeth found Catherine sitting on the porch steps, watching Luna and her calves settle into their evening routine. The smallest calf, Rusty, was playfully head-butting Luna's side while she patiently corrected his behavior with gentle nudges. "I've been thinking," Catherine said as her mother joined her. "What if we counter-offered AgriCorps? Not to sell, but to partner, with conditions. Sustainable water use, protection for Luna's family, and research rights for Dr. Winters." Elizabeth studied her daughter's profile in the fading light. "That sounds suspiciously like something a rancher would say, not a corporate lawyer." Catherine smiled faintly. "Maybe I've got more of Dad in me than I thought." After a pause, she added, "Or maybe coming home showed me what I've been missing in Boston." Elizabeth reached for her daughter's hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. "Katie, why did you really leave the ranch? It wasn't just about following your own path, was it?" Catherine's expression tightened. She stared at Luna, the loyal shepherd who had saved not just 3 calves, but possibly the entire ranch. "I found the medical bills," she finally confessed. "Dad's cancer treatments. The second mortgage he took out on the east pasture to pay for them." Her voice cracked. "He made me promise not to tell you how bad things really were. Said you had enough to worry about." Elizabeth felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her. "He told me it was just for new equipment," she whispered. "He didn't want you to know he was dying," Catherine continued. "Not until he had to tell you. He made me swear to look after you when the time came." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I thought that meant getting you away from this place that was draining every last penny. I never understood why it mattered so much." The sounds of night insects filled the silence between them as Elizabeth absorbed this revelation. Finally, she squeezed her daughter's hand. "Maybe we're both learning what really matters," she said softly. "And maybe Luna's been teaching us all along." The Montana State Fair had been a tradition in the region for over a century, a 10-day celebration of agricultural heritage with livestock competitions, rodeo events, and local crafts. Elizabeth had attended every year with Robert, but hadn't considered participating since his passing. Now, as she reviewed the entry forms spread across the kitchen table, a plan was forming. A herding demonstration, Elizabeth explained to Dr. Winters and Jake as they examined the competition categories. Luna and her calves in the arena, showing what they can do. It's unprecedented, Dr. Winters said, excitement evident in his voice. No one's ever entered cattle that respond to dog commands. The scientific community would be fascinated. Catherine entered with coffee mugs and a skeptical expression. The fair's in 2 weeks. Are they ready for that kind of public pressure? Luna, who had been dozing near the wood stove, lifted her head at this question, her intelligent eyes seeming to understand the conversation. She's ready, Elizabeth said with certainty. And so are they. The next 14 days transformed Big Sky Ranch into a training ground. Elizabeth and Jake constructed a practice arena, creating obstacles that would showcase the extraordinary bond between Luna and her adopted offspring. Catherine took charge of the administrative details, leveraging her legal expertise to navigate the unusual entry requirements. They've created a special exhibition category, she announced one evening, waving the confirmation email. They're calling it Interspecies Communication Demonstration. The calves, now nearly 6 months old and considerably larger, had developed a unique set of behaviors that blended cattle instincts with canine responses. They came when called, positioned themselves according to Luna's barks and movements, and had even mastered basic commands like stay and come around. Most remarkably, they communicated with vocalizations that were neither typical bovine sounds nor dog barks, but something uniquely their own. 2 days before the fair, Elizabeth was adjusting Luna's special competition harness when a familiar black SUV appeared on the driveway. Samantha Harding emerged, her corporate smile firmly in place. "Mrs. Miller, I've been trying to reach you," she said smoothly. "AgriCorps has a new proposal we think you'll find most attractive." Elizabeth continued buckling Luna's harness. "Not interested." $1 million, Samantha stated flatly. "For the calves and limited water rights." "That's final." Elizabeth finally straightened, meeting the corporate woman's gaze. "Miss Harding, I'm beginning to think you don't understand what's happening here." She gestured toward Luna and her 3 puppies, who were watching the exchange with eerie synchronicity. "This isn't about money anymore. It's about something new entering the world." "Everything has a price," Samantha insisted. "Not everything," Elizabeth replied. "Not family." The morning of the fair dawned clear and crisp, with the first hints of autumn coloring the distant mountains. Elizabeth loaded Luna and the calves into the specially modified trailer Jake had prepared, her stomach fluttering with nerves. "You ready for this?" Catherine asked, joining her mother by the truck. Elizabeth nodded, noticing how naturally Catherine now wore her jeans and boots, the corporate suits relegated to the closet. "Luna's ready. I'm just trying to keep up." The fairgrounds buzzed with activity as they arrived. News of the unusual entry had spread, and a crowd was already gathering near the livestock arena. Elizabeth felt a momentary panic at the sea of faces until she saw Jake waving from the designated preparation area. "Got everything set up," he assured them, helping to unload the animals. "They've given us the prime afternoon slot, right before the championship rodeo events." Luna remained remarkably calm amidst the chaos, keeping her calves close with occasional soft barks. The sight drew stares and whispers from passing fairgoers and competitors alike. "Is that them? The dog-raised cattle?" a young girl asked, pressing against the temporary fence. Elizabeth nodded. "This is Luna, and these are her babies, Rusty, Shadow, and Scout." The girl's eyes widened. "But they're cows. They don't seem to know that," Elizabeth replied with a smile. As their performance time approached, Dr. Winters arrived with unexpected company, a distinguished-looking woman in a practical field jacket. "Elizabeth, this is Dr. Elaine Hodges from National Geographic," he introduced. "She's a producer for their documentary division. I've been following your story through Jonathan's research papers," Dr. Hodges explained, her eyes gleaming with professional interest. "What Luna has accomplished has implications far beyond a heartwarming tale. We're interested in documenting this phenomenon long-term." Before Elizabeth could process this new development, the announcement came for their exhibition. Taking a deep breath, she led Luna and her unusual family toward the arena entrance. "Show them what family really means," she whispered to Luna, who looked up at her with absolute trust in her amber eyes. As they entered the sunlit arena, the crowd fell silent, then erupted in applause and murmurs of amazement. Luna, sensing the importance of the moment, stood tall and proud, her 3 calves perfectly aligned behind her. For the next 15 minutes, time seemed suspended as Luna guided her calves through a series of increasingly complex maneuvers. They responded to her subtle body language and distinctive vocalizations with a precision that left even experienced ranchers slack-jawed. When one of the calves, Shadow, executed a perfect flanking movement in response to Luna's barely audible whine, the crowd burst into spontaneous cheers. From her position at the arena's edge, Elizabeth caught glimpses of Catherine's face, transformed with wonder and something that looked remarkably like pride. Nearby, she spotted Samantha Harding watching with a calculating expression, and beyond her, Dr. Hodges filming intently. As the demonstration reached its conclusion, Luna gathered her calves into a tight formation and led them in a circle around Elizabeth before all 4 animals came to a perfect stop beside her. The arena erupted in a standing ovation. Elizabeth knelt beside Luna, overwhelmed by emotion. "You did it, girl," she whispered, burying her face in the shepherd's fur. "You saved us all." As afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the fairground's main pavilion, Elizabeth found herself surrounded by an unexpected crowd. Media representatives jostled with agricultural experts and curious onlookers, all eager to discuss Luna's unprecedented performance. Catherine had seamlessly stepped into the role of impromptu press manager, fielding questions with the same sharp efficiency she once reserved for corporate negotiations. "Mrs. Miller, could you tell us how Luna first came to adopt these calves?" asked a reporter from the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, her recorder extended hopefully. Before Elizabeth could respond, a commanding voice cut through the crowd. "If I might suggest, this conversation would be better continued at tomorrow's scheduled press conference." The speaker was a tall man with silver-streaked black hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He extended his hand to Elizabeth. "Richard Callahan, Horizon Documentaries. Your demonstration today was nothing short of revolutionary." "Press conference?" Elizabeth whispered to Catherine as the crowd reluctantly dispersed. Catherine smiled apologetically. "Dr. Hodges suggested it. After what happened out there, we need to control the narrative." Richard Callahan remained, his keen eyes assessing both women. "I've produced wildlife and agricultural documentaries for 30 years, Mrs. Miller, and I've never seen anything like what your dog accomplished with those calves. I'd like to discuss a potential series, not just a single documentary, but a longitudinal study of this remarkable family." "A series?" Elizabeth echoed, struggling to process the implications. "With proper funding, of course," he continued. "Enough to transform your ranch into a research center while maintaining its working status." His gaze shifted toward the arena where Luna and her calves were resting in a temporary pen. "What's happening there transcends entertainment. It's changing our understanding of animal cognition and cross-species communication." Catherine stepped forward, her lawyer instincts visibly engaging. "We'd need to discuss terms, protective clauses for the animals, and assurances about the ranch's autonomy." Richard nodded appreciatively at her professional tone. "Of course, I wouldn't expect anything less." As they exchanged business cards, Elizabeth noticed Samantha Harding watching from across the pavilion, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, the Agri-Corps executive merely nodded curtly before turning away. That evening, as they prepared to transport Luna and the calves back to the ranch, Jake approached with news that sent a chill through Elizabeth's momentary contentment. "Buyers from Agri-Corps were at the Patterson place today," he said quietly, helping secure the trailer doors. "Sounds like Old Man Patterson finally caved. That's the 3rd neighboring ranch they've acquired this month." Catherine overheard and joined them, her brow furrowed. "They're surrounding us. Cutting off potential expansion routes," Jake confirmed. Classic land squeeze tactic. Elizabeth watched Luna settle her calves for the journey home. The animals nestled together in a formation that was neither fully bovine nor canine, but something uniquely their own. "We're not selling," she said firmly. The drive back to Big Sky Ranch was mostly silent, each lost in their own thoughts until Catherine suddenly straightened in her seat. "Mom, turn on the radio. That's us they're talking about." The local station was indeed discussing the day's sensation, unprecedented demonstration of cross-species bonding that experts are calling a potential paradigm shift in animal behavior studies. The German shepherd named Luna and her adopted cattle have become overnight symbols of adaptation and family bonds that transcend biological boundaries. Elizabeth felt a swell of pride followed immediately by a wave of anxiety. The spotlight that had seemed like salvation now felt dangerously bright. As they crested the final hill toward home, the ranch's silhouette familiar against the twilight sky, Catherine's phone rang. Her expression darkened as she listened. "That was Alan," she said after hanging up. "AgriCorps filed preliminary paperwork challenging our water rights claim on the artesian spring." "On what grounds?" Elizabeth demanded. "They're claiming the aquifer primarily runs under properties they now control. They want forced sharing rights at minimum, full control at worst." Elizabeth gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Your father always said water would be the next gold rush in Montana." The following morning brought both promise and complications. Dr. Hodges arrived with a contract from National Geographic offering substantial funding for a year-long documentary project. Richard Callahan followed with an even more generous proposal for a multi-year series. Both represented potential financial security that could transform the ranch's prospects. As Catherine and Alan reviewed the offers in the dining room, Elizabeth escaped to the porch, where Luna lay watching her calves explore the yard with playful curiosity that belied their growing size. "We might actually make it, girl," she murmured to the shepherd. Luna's ears perked up suddenly, her body tensing. Following her gaze, Elizabeth spotted a familiar figure walking up the driveway. Samantha Harding, alone this time, without her corporate entourage. "Mrs. Miller," she called. "May we speak privately?" Elizabeth crossed her arms. "Anything you have to say can be said right here." Samantha glanced at Luna, who had risen to stand protectively near her mistress. "Very well. I've been authorized to inform you that AgriCorps is prepared to initiate legal proceedings regarding water access rights. The litigation could take years. So you're here to threaten me," Elizabeth stated flatly. "I'm here to offer an alternative." Samantha opened her portfolio. Full purchase of Big Sky Ranch at double market value, plus royalty rights to any methodologies developed from studying Luna's training techniques with cattle. The answer is still no. Samantha's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Mrs. Miller, be reasonable. You're a single rancher facing a multi-billion-dollar corporation with legal teams that can bury you in paperwork until your grandchildren are old." "She's not alone." Catherine's voice came from behind as she stepped onto the porch. "And you should know that we've filed counterclaims this morning with both the Water Court and the Department of Natural Resources." Samantha's expression hardened. "This doesn't have to be adversarial. You made it adversarial when you tried to manipulate an elderly widow into selling her heritage for pennies on the dollar," Catherine replied, her voice dangerously soft. "You didn't do your homework, Miss Harding. Before returning to the ranch, I specialized in natural resource disputes at Winthrop and Hayes. I know exactly how these cases play out." The corporate woman's composure visibly faltered. "This isn't over," she warned before turning sharply and walking back to her vehicle. As the black SUV disappeared down the driveway, Elizabeth turned to her daughter with newfound respect. "Elderly widow." Catherine grinned. "Strategic language. Makes for better press if they push forward." After a pause, she added more seriously, "Mom, there's something else we need to discuss. Something I should have told you when I first arrived." Elizabeth tensed, recognizing the gravity in her daughter's tone. "I didn't just come back because I saw you on the news," Catherine continued. "I came back because I've been diagnosed with the same cancer Dad had. It's early stages, treatable, but—" She swallowed hard. "I needed to come home." The world seemed to stop as Elizabeth absorbed this devastating revelation. Without a word, she pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, tears flowing freely between them. Luna approached, nudging her head against their joined hands, while her 3 calves gathered in a protective circle around the humans who had become part of their unusual pack. As afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the fairground's main pavilion, Elizabeth found herself surrounded by an unexpected crowd. Media representatives jostled with agricultural experts and curious onlookers, all eager to discuss Luna's unprecedented performance. Catherine had seamlessly stepped into the role of impromptu press manager, fielding questions with the same sharp efficiency she once reserved for corporate negotiations. "Mrs. Miller, could you tell us how Luna first came to adopt these calves?" asked a reporter from the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, her recorder extended hopefully. Before Elizabeth could respond, a commanding voice cut through the crowd. "If I might suggest, this conversation would be better continued at tomorrow's scheduled press conference." The speaker was a tall man with silver-streaked black hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He extended his hand to Elizabeth. "Richard Callahan, Horizon Documentaries. Your demonstration today was nothing short of revolutionary." "Press conference?" Elizabeth whispered to Catherine as the crowd reluctantly dispersed. Catherine smiled apologetically. "Dr. Hodges suggested it. After what happened out there, we need to control the narrative." Richard Callahan remained, his keen eyes assessing both women. "I've produced wildlife and agricultural documentaries for 30 years, Mrs. Miller, and I've never seen anything like what your dog accomplished with those calves. I'd like to discuss a potential series, not just a single documentary, but a longitudinal study of this remarkable family." "A series?" Elizabeth echoed, struggling to process the implications. "With proper funding, of course," he continued. "Enough to transform your ranch into a research center while maintaining its working status." His gaze shifted toward the arena where Luna and her calves were resting in a temporary pen. "What's happening there transcends entertainment. It's changing our understanding of animal cognition and cross-species communication." Catherine stepped forward, her lawyer instincts visibly engaging. "We'd need to discuss terms, protective clauses for the animals, and assurances about the ranch's autonomy." Richard nodded appreciatively at her professional tone. "Of course, I wouldn't expect anything less." As they exchanged business cards, Elizabeth noticed Samantha Harding watching from across the pavilion, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, the AgriCorps executive merely nodded curtly before turning away. That evening, as they prepared to transport Luna and the calves back to the ranch, Jake approached with news that sent a chill through Elizabeth's momentary contentment. "Buyers from AgriCorps were at the Patterson place today," he said quietly, helping secure the trailer doors. "Sounds like Old Man Patterson finally caved. That's the third neighboring ranch they've acquired this month." Catherine overheard and joined them, her brow furrowed. "They're surrounding us, cutting off potential expansion routes," Jake confirmed. Classic land squeeze tactic. Elizabeth watched Luna settle her calves for the journey home. The animals nestled together in a formation that was neither fully bovine nor canine, but something uniquely their own. "We're not selling," she said firmly. The drive back to Big Sky Ranch was mostly silent, each lost in their own thoughts until Catherine suddenly straightened in her seat. "Mom, turn on the radio. That's us they're talking about." The local station was indeed discussing the day's sensation, unprecedented demonstration of cross-species bonding that experts are calling a potential paradigm shift in animal behavior studies. The German shepherd named Luna and her adopted cattle have become overnight symbols of adaptation and family bonds that transcend biological boundaries. Elizabeth felt a swell of pride followed immediately by a wave of anxiety. The spotlight that had seemed like salvation now felt dangerously bright. As they crested the final hill toward home, the ranch's silhouette familiar against the twilight sky, Catherine's phone rang. Her expression darkened as she listened. "That was Alan," she said after hanging up. "AgriCorps filed preliminary paperwork challenging our water rights claim on the artesian spring." "On what grounds?" Elizabeth demanded. "They're claiming the aquifer primarily runs under properties they now control. They want forced sharing rights at minimum, full control at worst." Elizabeth gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Your father always said water would be the next gold rush in Montana." The following morning brought both promise and complications. Dr. Hodges arrived with a contract from National Geographic offering substantial funding for a year-long documentary project. Richard Callahan followed with an even more generous proposal for a multi-year series. Both represented potential financial security that could transform the ranch's prospects. As Catherine and Alan reviewed the offers in the dining room, Elizabeth escaped to the porch, where Luna lay watching her calves explore the yard with playful curiosity that belied their growing size. "We might actually make it, girl," she murmured to the shepherd. Luna's ears perked up suddenly, her body tensing. Following her gaze, Elizabeth spotted a familiar figure walking up the driveway. Samantha Harding, alone this time, without her corporate entourage. "Mrs. Miller," she called. "May we speak privately?" Elizabeth crossed her arms. "Anything you have to say can be said right here." Samantha glanced at Luna, who had risen to stand protectively near her mistress. "Very well. I've been authorized to inform you that AgriCorps is prepared to initiate legal proceedings regarding water access rights. The litigation could take years. So you're here to threaten me," Elizabeth stated flatly. "I'm here to offer an alternative." Samantha opened her portfolio. Full purchase of Big Sky Ranch at double market value, plus royalty rights to any methodologies developed from studying Luna's training techniques with cattle. The answer is still no. Samantha's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Mrs. Miller, be reasonable. You're a single rancher facing a multi-billion-dollar corporation with legal teams that can bury you in paperwork until your grandchildren are old." "She's not alone." Catherine's voice came from behind as she stepped onto the porch. "And you should know that we've filed counterclaims this morning with both the Water Court and the Department of Natural Resources." Samantha's expression hardened. "This doesn't have to be adversarial. You made it adversarial when you tried to manipulate an elderly widow into selling her heritage for pennies on the dollar," Catherine replied, her voice dangerously soft. "You didn't do your homework, Miss Harding. Before returning to the ranch, I specialized in natural resource disputes at Winthrop and Hayes. I know exactly how these cases play out." The corporate woman's composure visibly faltered. "This isn't over," she warned before turning sharply and walking back to her vehicle. As the black SUV disappeared down the driveway, Elizabeth turned to her daughter with newfound respect. "Elderly widow." Catherine grinned. "Strategic language. Makes for better press if they push forward." After a pause, she added more seriously, "Mom, there's something else we need to discuss. Something I should have told you when I first arrived." Elizabeth tensed, recognizing the gravity in her daughter's tone. "I didn't just come back because I saw you on the news," Catherine continued. "I came back because I've been diagnosed with the same cancer Dad had. It's early stages, treatable, but—" She swallowed hard. "I needed to come home." The world seemed to stop as Elizabeth absorbed this devastating revelation. Without a word, she pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, tears flowing freely between them. Luna approached, nudging her head against their joined hands, while her 3 calves gathered in a protective circle around the humans who had become part of their unusual pack. The diagnosis changed everything. Within days, Elizabeth had transformed the ranch's spare bedroom into a comfortable space for Catherine, with a view of the mountains she had once been so eager to escape. Dr. Chun recommended an oncologist in Bozeman who specialized in genetic cancers, and appointments were scheduled with urgent efficiency. "I don't want this to derail everything we've built," Catherine insisted one morning as she sat at the kitchen table, reviewing legal documents despite the fatigue that increasingly shadowed her features. "The documentary contracts, the water rights dispute, they can't wait." Elizabeth placed a mug of herbal tea beside her daughter. "They can wait. You can't." "Mom," Catherine's voice cracked slightly. "We both know what happened to Dad when he put everything on hold for treatment. The ranch nearly collapsed. I won't let that happen again." The painful truth hung between them. Robert had postponed critical ranch maintenance to focus on his own cancer battle, leaving Elizabeth financially vulnerable after his death. Now history threatened to repeat itself in cruelly inverted form. Luna padded into the kitchen, followed by her 3 calves who had now grown so large they barely fit through the doorway together. The improbable family had developed an uncanny sensitivity to human emotions, and now the shepherd approached Catherine, resting her head gently on the young woman's lap. "She knows," Elizabeth said softly. "She always knows." Catherine stroked Luna's soft head. "I've been thinking about something Dr. Winters said, about how Luna and the calves have developed a hybrid communication system that isn't purely canine or bovine." She looked up at her mother. "What if that's what we need? A hybrid approach. Not just ranching, not just research, not just tourism, but something entirely new." Before Elizabeth could respond, one of the calves, Rusty, the smallest but most vocal, made a strange sound, somewhere between a moo and a whine. He bumped his head against Catherine's shoulder, then turned toward the window with evident agitation. "What is it, boy?" Catherine asked, rising to look outside. What she saw sent her reaching for her phone. AgriCorps trucks at the property line. Looks like they're setting up drilling equipment. The confrontation that followed burned itself into local memory. Elizabeth, Catherine, and Jake faced down Samantha Harding and a team of geologists and drillers at the disputed boundary between Big Sky Ranch and the recently acquired Patterson property. This is a legal soil and water testing operation on land we own, Samantha insisted, waving a document. We have permits. Your permits don't extend to our water table, Catherine countered, her legal training evident in her precise language despite the color draining from her face. And we have a court-ordered stay against any drilling operations pending resolution of our dispute. As tensions escalated, Luna suddenly darted between the groups, her 3 calves following in perfect formation. The shepherd positioned herself at the exact property line, barking sharply at the AgriCorps team while her calves formed a protective barrier behind her. Call off your dog, Mrs. Miller, Samantha demanded nervously. She's not threatening you, Elizabeth replied calmly. She's defending her territory, something your company might understand better than most. What happened next would be recounted in local diners and bars for years to come. Rusty, the smallest calf, suddenly collapsed, his legs buckling as he let out a distressed sound that was neither bovine nor canine. Elizabeth and Catherine rushed to his side while Luna circled anxiously, nudging her fallen child with evident concern. He's burning up, Elizabeth said, feeling the calves hide. We need Dr. Chun. The emergency transformed the standoff. Even Samantha Harding appeared shaken by the calves' obvious distress. As Jake called the veterinarian, Luna did something extraordinary. She began herding her other 2 calves away from the fallen Rusty, moving them with urgent barks toward a distant part of the property. She wants us to follow, Catherine realized, remembering the discovery of the artesian spring months earlier. With Elizabeth staying with Rusty, Catherine followed Luna and the other calves, pushing past her growing weakness to keep pace. The shepherd led them on a winding path to a remote section of the ranch near an old rock formation where early settlers had built a stone root cellar, now long abandoned. Luna began frantically digging at the base of the rocks, exposing what looked at first like ordinary weeds. But Catherine noticed a distinctive purple flower among the greenery. Mom, she called into her phone. Luna found something. Some kind of plant. Dr. Chun arrived at the same time Catherine returned with samples of the plant. After examining Rusty, the veterinarian's expression was grave. It looks like toxic plant exposure, she said. His symptoms match meadow saffron poisoning, but it's not native to this region. Catherine held out the plants Luna had uncovered. Could it be this? Dr. Chin's eyes widened. That's not meadow saffron. It's Blackfoot medicinal foxglove. The native tribes used it as an antidote for certain livestock poisonings. She turned to Elizabeth. Where did you find this? It's nearly extinct in Montana. Luna found it, Elizabeth explained, just like she found the spring. As Dr. Chun prepared a treatment using the medicinal plant, Samantha Harding observed from a distance, her corporate confidence visibly shaken. When Alan Doyle arrived, summoned by Catherine's urgent text, the AgriCorps executive approached him. We need to talk, she said quietly. This situation has evolved. The next 24 hours passed in anxious vigilance as Rusty fought for his life. Luna refused to leave the calf's side, whining softly whenever his breathing seemed to labor. Elizabeth and Catherine took shifts monitoring his condition, their own conflict with AgriCorps temporarily eclipsed by the more immediate crisis. Dawn brought cautious optimism as Rusty showed signs of improvement. As Catherine dozed in a chair beside the makeshift sick bay in the barn, Elizabeth stepped outside to find Samantha Harding waiting. Your lawyer and I had a long conversation yesterday, the executive said without preamble. AgriCorps is prepared to withdraw its water rights challenge. Elizabeth's exhaustion lifted slightly. In exchange for what? Partnership, not acquisition, Samantha replied. What happened yesterday with that calf and the medicinal plant? It sparked interest at the highest levels of our research division. She hesitated before continuing. Mrs. Miller, your ranch appears to sit on more than just water. That plant your dog found. Initial tests suggest compounds with significant pharmaceutical potential. Elizabeth studied the woman who had been her adversary for months. So now we're valuable in a whole new way. Now you have leverage, Samantha corrected. And frankly, the PR battle is one we can't win. Not against a cancer-stricken daughter and a miracle dog saving orphaned calves. Her professional veneer cracked slightly. My sister died of the same cancer your husband had. I'm not entirely the corporate monster you think I am. Inside the barn, Rusty let out a sound that was stronger than it had been in days. Elizabeth turned toward the doorway, then back to Samantha. Tell your lawyers to talk to Catherine when she's ready. But understand this, Luna and her family are non-negotiable. Whatever happens here, they stay together. Samantha nodded. I believe we can work with that. As the executive departed, Elizabeth returned to find Catherine awake, color returning to her pale cheeks. Was that who I think it was? She asked. Elizabeth nodded. The terms of surrender are better than we could have hoped for. Catherine turned her gaze to Rusty, who was now standing shakily while Luna provided support against his wobbling legs. You know what Dad used to say about this land? Catherine murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Sometimes the best treasure is the one you didn't know you were sitting on. The transformation of Big Sky Ranch happened gradually, then suddenly, like the changing of seasons in Montana. 2 years after Luna first adopted her calves, the property had evolved into something no one could have predicted. The Horizon Center for Cross-Species Behavior and Botanical Research, funded jointly by pharmaceutical interests, scientific grants, and documentary proceeds. The old barn had been carefully renovated, its weathered beams preserved while state-of-the-art research facilities were integrated within its walls. The pastures remained working grazing land, but now hosted controlled studies on animal behavior and communication patterns. Where financial ruin had once loomed, sustainable prosperity had taken root, not through surrendering to corporate interests, but through a carefully negotiated partnership that preserved the ranch's soul while leveraging its newfound resources. I hardly recognized the place, Dr. Winters remarked one golden October afternoon as he and Elizabeth walked the property. Yet somehow, it feels more authentically itself than ever. Elizabeth nodded, watching Luna, now 8 years old but still remarkably spry, leading her fully grown calves across the east pasture. The 3 cattle, massive compared to their canine mother, continued to display behaviors that challenged scientific understanding. They responded to complex herding commands, communicated with vocalizations that combined bovine and canine elements, and maintained a family bond that defied conventional classification. Robert would have loved this, Elizabeth said softly. Not just the success, but the way it happened, finding value in what was already here. Near the main house, Catherine was conducting a tour for visiting researchers, her professional expertise now seamlessly blended with ranch knowledge. Her cancer was in remission after aggressive treatment, though regular monitoring remained a fact of life. The illness that had brought her home had become, paradoxically, the force that helped her reconnect with her heritage. Now serving as the center's legal and administrative director, she had found a way to honor both her father's legacy and her own ambitions. Mom, Catherine called, waving Elizabeth over. The team from Cornell wants to see Luna's training demonstration. As Elizabeth changed direction, Dr. Winters smiled. You know, we've published 6 papers on Luna's methods now. There are ranchers in 3 countries implementing modified versions of her techniques. Not bad for a dog who just did what came naturally, Elizabeth replied. The medicinal foxglove Luna had discovered, now cultivated in carefully managed plots, had yielded compounds that showed promise for treating livestock ailments and potentially human conditions as well. The spring continued to provide sustainable water, managed through an agreement that benefited surrounding properties while preserving ecological balance. Samantha Harding had been replaced at AgriCorp following the company's strategic pivot toward research partnerships rather than land acquisition. Her replacement, a more collaborative executive, had become an unlikely ally in developing sustainable models for rural economic development. As Elizabeth approached the demonstration area, she found Jake, now the center's operations manager, preparing the space for Luna's daily session. The local ranch hand who had stood by them through crisis after crisis had found his own unexpected calling as an interpreter between traditional agricultural knowledge and modern research methodologies. The school buses just arrived, he informed Elizabeth. 30 kids from Bozeman Elementary, all eager to see the cow whisperer dog in action. Luna had indeed become something of a celebrity, her story inspiring books, documentaries, and even a children's television character. Yet Elizabeth had insisted on maintaining the shepherd's dignity and well-being above all else. No excessive public appearances, no exploitation, no separation from her unusual family. As the children settled onto the benches, eyes wide with anticipation, Luna trotted into the demonstration space followed by her 3 children, Rusty, Shadow, and Scout, now imposing adult cattle who still deferred to their canine mother with unwavering loyalty. What you're about to see, Elizabeth began, addressing the young audience, is more than just a clever dog trick. It's a story about family, about how love doesn't always follow the rules we think it should. Luna glanced at Elizabeth, amber eyes somehow conveying perfect understanding, then turned to her calves with a distinctive bark that sent them into a precise formation. The children gasped as the massive animals moved with balletic precision in response to Luna's subtle signals. Catherine joined her mother at the edge of the arena, slipping her hand into Elizabeth's as they watched the demonstration unfold. "Remember when you thought this place was finished?" Catherine asked softly. Elizabeth squeezed her daughter's hand. "The land always knows more than we do." That evening, as sunset painted the mountains in shades of amber and gold, the extended family of Big Sky Ranch gathered on the porch. Elizabeth and Catherine sat side by side in rocking chairs, while Jake and Dr. Chun, now a permanent fixture in Jake's life, occupied the steps below. Luna and her 3 puppies settled in the yard, the cattle forming a protective circle around their aging mother. 2 years, Catherine mused. Everything different, yet everything the same. Elizabeth nodded, watching Luna groom one of her massive offspring with maternal dedication. That's the trick to surviving out here, knowing which changes to embrace and which traditions to preserve. In the fading light, Luna lifted her head to give a soft howl that was immediately echoed by her cattle children in their strange hybrid voices, neither fully bovine nor canine, but something uniquely their own. The sound carried across the valley, a testament to bonds that transcended biological limitations and expectations. "I think that's Luna's way of saying some families you're born into," Jake observed, "and others you create along the way." As darkness settled over Montana's vast landscape, the lights of Big Sky Ranch, now the horizon center, glowed warmly against the gathering night. Where once a single widow had faced seemingly insurmountable odds, now stood a thriving community bound by something more powerful than blood or business interests, a shared belief that sometimes the most remarkable solutions emerge from the most unlikely beginnings. Luna settled her head on her paws, her 3 improbable children nestled nearby, while the humans who had become part of her extended pack continued their quiet conversation on the porch. In her canine wisdom, perhaps she understood what the humans were still learning, that family, like life itself, finds a way to adapt, connect, and flourish in even the most unexpected circumstances. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and if you watch till the end, comment, "I watched till the end," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very exciting.